Hi everyone, my name is Tori, this is Nova Life, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a really fun video that I've been waiting so long to do. So this is gonna be 29 books for my 29th birthday. So when you're watching this video, if you're watching it on the day that it goes up, it is my 29th birthday, which I love celebrating my birthday. It's something that every year I always celebrate. I always love celebrating. I love doing fun things. I love treating myself. I love doing all that stuff. So I figured for you guys, I would talk about some of my favorite books, like of all time. So the 29 books in this video is gonna be a mix of some of my top reads of this year, as well as some like top reads of like the past years that I just want to talk about again that I feel like I haven't talked about. It's just 29 of my absolute favorite books, so let's just go ahead and dive right in. So the first one is a beloved book that I don't really talk about because this author has a million books that I've talked about in the past, and that's Bethany Chris. So this is Captivated by Bethany Chris. I love this cover. So look how absolutely sexy this cover is. So if you don't know this, I used to work for Bethany Chris as her PA years ago. I do not do that anymore, but during that time that I worked for her, she used to send me like paperbacks of her newest books. And when I was working for her, this is one of the books that was releasing during that time. It was like one of my first like releases with her, working for her, and I loved the process. And so this book has like a special place in my heart. I actually read it as a beta reader for her before I even worked for her. This book just holds like a really cool special place in my heart. So this is like a mafia man. He's very quiet. He kind of is known as like the ghost, where he can just like take someone out without really anyone knowing. Our female character is actually from a different family in New York. Our main male character, he is from Chicago. Our female character is from New York, and she's a ballerina. The possessiveness of Joe in this book is just off the charts. He is like, I'm gonna sit back and like let you do your thing, but I will step in when need to. And there was a time that he had to step in, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. This makes me want to reread this book. But this is also one of my favorite covers just because of how like perfect it is and how sexy it is. I don't know. Sometimes a man cover will always get me. With abs, with just everything, it'll always get me. But this is one that I absolutely love by Bethany Chris, and it's part of my collection, and I will always cherish it. So I made this list in like no particular order. I was just thinking of books that I've read this year, thinking of books that I wanted to talk about in the past that hold a special place in my heart, just like anything like that. So the next book is In the Weeds by B.K. Borson. So I read this book. I think this was my first book of this year that I gave 5 stars, but it's also one of the first books that I read this year, and it hit me on another level. Like, there are times when you go through periods and you read books and they just speak to your soul in just a particular way, and this book did that for me. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it was about this book, but I devoured it when I read it. So this book, it takes place, I mean, it's the second book in the Love Light series, but I think you can read them as standalones. I don't think you need to read the first one, but our female character, she comes to Love Light Farms, and she is a social media manager. She's coming to help the female character from the first book kind of like get their social media presence started, and that's when she meets our main male character, Bennett, but come to find out they've actually had a one-night stand previously, and so they're kind of like forced together, forced proximity. They're both working through personal things, and so it's kind of like this, a little bit of a healing journey that they go on together, where they're trying to figure things out. They're trying to just like work on things personally, trying to figure out if they want to go into a relationship with each other, like is now the right time type of a thing. And I don't know, just some of the quotes in this book just really spoke to me. I don't tab often, but I do highlight a lot. But I know a lot of people really do love this book as well. Just like one of the quotes is, maybe this is what happy is supposed to be, a person, a place, a single moment in time. And I'm someone who I always cherish, of course, for my birthday, I cherish a lot of memories. So if I can like, of course I'm a materialistic person, like look at these books behind me, right? But I do cherish memories and like moments. So like random moments I think about that don't really mean a lot to any other person, or maybe the other person, my husband, my brother, my mom, my dad, my friends, or anything like that, but to me it means something. And I don't know, I love that. Like my happiness can be different things, and I feel like I'm not explaining it right, but I really love this book. I feel like I'm gonna take like 5 minutes for each of these books, because honestly I feel like I could spend a lot of time on them. So the next book I have is a chunker, and it is Redeeming 6 by Chloe Walsh. It is huge, it is massive, and it is one of my top books of all time now, and it's gonna be on my top books of the year. Like, this book is sitting at number 1 right now, and I have yet to read a book since I read it in March, February. It's been a while since I read this, and I've yet to read a book that can top this. I'll just tell you that. So this is the second book to Joey and Aoife's story. It's the fourth book in the Boys of Tillman series. So the first two books, Binding and Keeping 13, which are also going to be on the top books of my year, but instead of putting 4 books on this list, I just picked my favorite from the series. But literally all of them are 5-star reads for me. All of them have a, like, I don't know, I'm rereading this series right now, and I'm just absolutely enjoying it and savoring it and devouring it. And this is my first time I'm rereading since I've read it the first time. And I'm so excited. I'm just so excited to be back into this world. But Joey and Aoife, specifically Joey, goes through a lot in this book in particular. And I just related to him a lot with his journey and what he's gone through. And I really love Aoife as a female character, that she is the one that's standing strong next to him and constantly supporting him in any possible way that she can. And yeah, this is a very emotional, angsty, contemporary romance. There's definitely a lot of triggers for this series, but if you're interested, to just read it, see what you think about it. That's always what I say, but it is one of my favorites and I absolutely love it. The next book is actually a fun book. I say fun book, but it was still like a really, I think it was like a 4.5 or 5-star read. All of these were either 4.5 or 5-star reads, I'll tell you that. So this book I want to talk about is Shut Out by Avery Keelan. I've talked about Offsides by Avery Keelan. Love that book. I've talked about Offsides by Avery Keelan a lot, and when this book came out this year, I was thoroughly surprised. Not only does the female character like live, breathe, die in pink, like the color pink, but like the romance between these two people was so good. And this is a lot shorter than Offside. So I really think Avery Keelan took that criticism, I guess you can say, of people saying this is a good book, but it's long as shit, because it is ridiculously long. So I'm really glad she cut it down. And I didn't realize how much she cut it down until I saw this book physically compared to Offsides, which is actually on my shelf because I put them next to each other. But this book is a one-night stand where both of the characters didn't really know who they were. They had a one-night stand. They were wearing masks at like a Halloween party, so it's perfect for that going into October. But also our female character, she moves into the hockey kind of like team house that her brother lives in, and the person that she had a one-night stand with is her brother's teammate. So of course it's forbidden. She has ADHD, so I don't know if Avery Keelan has ADHD herself, but I thought the rep was really good. My husband has ADHD, so I felt like there was a lot of like similarities in this book. But yeah, it was really, really good, and I would highly recommend it if you're looking for a good hockey romance that's forbidden. And the female character is just perfect. I'll just tell you that. Just because she's like pink personified. The next book I want to talk about is Right Man, Right Time by Megan Quinn. So this is another hockey romance that I read this year. And I don't know what it was. I don't always vibe with Megan Quinn, but this book blew me away when I read the audiobook of it. I was laughing out loud at this. I was devouring it. I think I finished it in like less than a day. I was just like having the best time. Like, I know Megan Quinn can write really good banter if it like hits with you, but this one just hit with me and I loved it. I don't know if it's because our main male character was a lot older than our female character, or like she was younger but she was like very mature for her age. But I thoroughly enjoyed the romance because it was one of those things where yes, they meet and they have this like, hey, I need you to do me a favor and my ex is over there. I'm gonna kiss you just to make him jealous. And he's like, okay, like you really don't know who I am, because he's this NHL hockey player at this college bar that's just like hanging out, you know what I mean? And so she kisses him and she's like, oh wow, you're a good kisser, like, oh ha ha ha, you know? And he's like, oh, you're going to do something for me too, because he recently broke up with his girlfriend for, I think they've been together for almost like 10 years or something like that. He found her cheating. And I don't know, I just loved the journey that they go on where they heal kind of together, because they're kind of getting over an ex at the same time. So they don't always, they bond together over that, but they bond in like a, let's work through our issues, is it them or was it me type of a thing. And as they're working through that, they kind of have this really nice friendship develops, and then it develops into a romance. So I don't know what it was. I don't know if the journey that they go on was what got me, but this book was great. I loved it. It was such a good time. So amazing. And another book that I read this year was Trust Me by Tiffany Patterson. So this is a billionaire romance, and it took so many twists and turns. Like, it has so many tropes. So not only is he a billionaire, but she is like trying to get this kind of like revenge on him in a way that's like she's forced to, like, so she's like in a tough spot. I don't want to say too much because I feel like it's part of the plot, but like she has this, someone is telling her to do this or else, and that or else, I'll leave it. It has something to do with her personal life, but she like infiltrates this company and she starts like stealing all this data and secrets, and he finds out and he's like, you know what, instead of like putting you in jail or like making you go through this whole trial thing and like getting you in trouble that way, you're gonna marry me and I'm gonna force you to marry me, and that's going to be your punishment because I know you don't particularly like me. But he was starting to feel something for her before all of that happened. I enjoyed the ride of this book so much because you're like thinking it's going to go one way and you're like, oh, they're finally starting to fall in love. Like, oh my God, she's starting to feel something for him, even though she's supposed to get this revenge. And then like, bam, plot twist. They're supposed to get married. It's like an arranged marriage thing. It was so good. Like, it is up there with some of my favorite books this year, and I really want everyone to read it. I don't have a physical book. I need to buy one for myself. But that is one that I loved the journey, and I want to explore more by Tiffany Patterson. So if you've read some of her books, let me know in the comments down below which one I should pick up next. The next one I have is Divine River by Marina Vivancos. So this is actually a novella, and I don't think, when I looked on Amazon, I don't think that she has paperbacks of her books yet, which I want the cover of this. Like, I want a physical cover because I think this cover is absolutely stunning. So I got Marina Vivancos as a recommendation from Samantha, from Books with Samantha, and she was like, hey, start with this one. I read this book and I was really blown away by how emotional she writes. So this book is like an MM kind of novella. It's on the shorter side. Like, it's a full-length book. You do get a full-length book. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt like, oh, it was like a shorter book that I wish it was a full-length book. Like, I got a really good, well-rounded story in like a novella length book. I think it was like less than 150 pages. One of the main male characters moves in next door, and one is like super closed off, like doesn't really want to associate with a lot of things, with a lot of people. He like has his friend group, he has his hobbies that he does, and that's it. Like, he doesn't want to do anything else. But then this other character that moves in is breaking down all of those walls, and they kind of have this, once again, this friendship that develops because they're like, he's trying to break down these walls, trying to understand why he is the way he is. And I feel like she talks about a lot of interesting things when you come out as bisexual, as gay, as a lesbian, like anything like that, right? And you have a parent that that necessarily isn't on board, and you know that they're not going to be on board, like the struggle with that of trying to tell them, like, do you ever tell them, you know? And I just felt like this was a really, really, like I said, well-rounded book where it touched on not only really good romance, but also that kind of journey that the character goes on. Loved it. I loved it. I've read a couple other books by her, but I want to read more. I want to dive into I think she has like some shifter stuff, maybe like paranormal stuff. The next book I want to talk about is one that took literally every single book platform, Book Talk, Bookstagram, and BookTube by storm. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Okay, listen, when I picked up this book, I'm gonna tell you 100% right now, when I picked up this book at Barnes & Noble, I literally went in to look at just any other books. Like, I don't know what it was. I was just, looking around. It was before this book actually even released. It was like the Sunday or Monday before it released. And they had it out early. And I was like, wow, these sprayed edges are really cool. Like, they're dragons. And I read the back. And I was like, wow, this seems like a really cool dragon fantasy romance. I had never read anything by Rebecca Yarros before. I didn't even know this was like her first fantasy type book, I guess. I didn't know what this book was going to be, and I didn't actually expect it to turn out the way that it did. Like, I didn't expect it to blow up. I'm going to be 100% honest. So when everyone started talking about it, I was like, wait, I have that on my shelf. And I spent 2 days sitting in my chair. I got like the worst kink in my neck. And I vlogged it for my Patreon. So if you join my Patreon, or if you're on there, you can go find it. But I did like an exclusive reading vlog, and I loved it. It was such a fun fantasy romance. It doesn't have like a big fantasy world because it takes place at this like college, but the dragon riders and the different types of people that you can kind of turn into, the whole political aspect of it with her and her mother being like the general basically, and this romance of someone that literally is supposed to hate her. And I just thought all of these things combined made for such an addicting read that it was very hard for me to put down. So I had the best time with it. And it's been a while since I just sat with a book. Like, when I was reading this book, it was a while that I just could sit down with a good book and just devour it and just be addicted and just want to like dive into the book. You know what I mean? Like, it was a while that happened. So it was just perfect timing, I guess. I don't know, but I definitely think that everyone is going crazy for a good reason. And I personally loved it. I am one that I love this book so much. The next book I have to talk about is Belladonna by Adeline Grace. So I've talked about this since last year, since I read it during the fall, and I have yet to read Foxglove. It's something that I want to read this week before the end of September for sure. I have the audiobook for it, but this is a very cool YA fantasy with a romance. I don't really know how to describe it. If you're someone who doesn't particularly like super spooky and super horror stuff, like for the Halloween season, because I'm not like that. I don't like spooky shit. I don't like horror stuff. I can't do it. Like, it just really creeps me out. Like, I am a scaredy cat at heart, okay? And when I read this book, it had like the perfect amount. There was like 2 or 3 scenes, one in particular I still remember, but like a couple scenes where I was like, ooh, this is very atmospheric. Like, it put me in that mood, you know what I mean? And I thought that the development of the fantasy aspects with this whole thing that she is like, you know, escaped death as an infant, and now he is just following her around trying to figure out all of these things, and everywhere she goes and anyone she's around, they die. It's just a very interesting book. So I'm extremely excited for Foxglove, even though I haven't seen like the best reviews. It hasn't been like as highly rated as Belladonna, but this is one, I'm pretty sure you have to read this before reading Foxglove because it's a continuation of her story. So yeah, that's why I'm not going to talk about Foxglove, or I didn't want to read it before this video, but definitely check out this. I loved this book when I read it last year. I feel like maybe I should reread this before reading Foxglove. You can tell me in the comments down below. Should I reread this before reading Foxglove, or just like dive into Foxglove? Tell me in the comments down below. Please and thank you. The next book I have is Happy Place by Emily Henry. So I know that a lot of people feel a certain type of way about Emily Henry. You either love her or you hate her, okay? I recently picked up Beach Lovers last year, or was it this year? No, it was last year. And I actually really enjoyed that book. But I tell you, I think this one tops it. And I think it's because there's this second chance aspect with this book where our female character, she's going on this trip to her friend's vacation home that they've gone to every single year, and no one knows that her and her fiance are not together anymore, that she's kind of kept it a secret, but they invite him because they assume that they're together. So not only is she supposed to play nice with him and pretend that everything's okay, but she also has to like, I don't know, like just deal with all of her friends and try to figure out how to tell them everything. And I thought this was like a perfect summer read because I read it during the summer. And while summer is, you know, not here anymore because it's officially fall, but I still think if you haven't read it, I think you could pick it up this year and still really enjoy it. So I'm going to mention this one just because, I mean, one, it's a pink cover, but I also am really glad that I loved this book because it was a pink book. Y'all, I'm not even like halfway through these books. Okay, the next one I'll talk about is Reckless by Elsie Silver. I feel like every time Elsie Silver has a release, it just keeps getting better and better. Now you're gonna be surprised because this book is actually secret and surprise pregnancy. Well, she gets pregnant, it's a surprise, and then she keeps the baby a secret from Theo. And when I tell you the first time that Theo meets the child, I actually teared up, and that doesn't ever happen. And I don't know if it was because Elsie Silver wrote it. I don't know what it was, but this book I really, really, really loved, and I cannot wait for the last book in the series to come out. Like, Beau's book has been one that has been such and like highly anticipated read for me that I'm like, please don't let me down. Please don't let me down, because this is going to be a series where I have not rated a book lower than like 4.5 stars. That's saying something for a 5-book series for me to not rate anything lower than that. The next one I want to talk about is a fun fantasy romance that I've talked about a lot, and that's Fate of a Royal by Megan Brandy and Amo Jones. So both of those authors haven't been like hits with me, but this book, I ate it up, okay? Like, I don't know what it was. I mean, it's probably because of the hero. He's very toxic. He's very much an anti-hero. He's very much a bad boy. And she's extremely intrigued by him. And when he takes basically her captive, I guess, he takes her back to his home and like is trying to figure out who she is, what she is, all of this stuff. Like, how can she be in this magical world when she wasn't really raised as a magical being, you know? It makes it extremely interesting, and it made it a very addictive read for me. So I just had a great time with it, and then gave it 4.5 stars, I think. 4.5, 5 stars, whatever. I think I rated it 5 on Goodreads. It was a fantastic time, and I cannot wait for the next book to come out in October, because I'm like, that cliffhanger, I was not expecting that. Like, literally, I was not expecting that cliffhanger, so now I'm like, I need to know, like, how are they going to move forward? But I do know that they are writing the first 2 books in the series follow one couple, and I think, like, every 2 books after is, like, one particular couple, because the main male character, he has 3 other brothers and 1 that he considers like it's his best friend that's a brother too. So I'm extremely intrigued. It was spicy, it was good, it was a good fantasy, low fantasy, like very low fantasy romance. I was extremely surprised. The next one I'm going to touch on briefly, because if I talk about it, I feel like I can sit here for like 10 minutes and talk about this book. That's Manacled. Manacled by Senlin Yu. I did read that this summer. I spent 5 days reading it, and it utterly destroyed me. I did not like sob like some people, but it was a masterpiece. I can appreciate for the writing and what she did, the way that it was structured. Just like, there is not one thing I think I would change, because I feel like if you change the length of the book, you're not going to feel as connected to the characters. Because a lot of people are like, oh my god, it's so long, oh my god, it's so long, and I really don't want to read it because it's so long. But I'll tell you, it needs to be that long because they have a very long history, and their story spans like a decade or more, I feel like. Like, it's a very long time. So there's a lot of history there, and if you have the time, go read it. If it's interesting to you, you do not have to read Harry Potter like the original books or really watch the movie to understand, because it's like after all the movies and stuff, and she takes it in a very different way, and I'm not mad about it, and I loved it. The next one I want to talk about is Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. This was a very surprising read. I do not particularly like these covers. It reminds me of like the golden something books, like when I was younger. I don't know. Monica sent me this and she was like, it does remind me of those books, but it was a fun read. And it was very fun. I gave it 4.5 stars. Second chance, our female character goes back home to her ranch where she meets her brother's best friend, and he's like actually mature and like doing things and owning a restaurant and helping out with riding lessons. And she comes back because she was like, I think, bucked off of her horse while she was competing, and so now she's like spooked to get back on a horse, and every time she tries to, she panics. But she's trying to keep it a secret from her brothers and from her dad because her mother passed away from a accident, like a riding accident like that. So our main male character is actually kind of like helping her, but also at the same time they have a secret relationship. And it was a fantastic good time, I'll tell you that. Okay, I'm going to try and speed it up a little bit. The next one is Two Fights by Nikki Castle. I've talked about this a lot. This is the second book in the Fight Game series. There is now 4 books, and after reading all 4 books, this one still stands at the top for me. This is a friends to lovers, which I know is not everyone's favorite, but it's my favorite. Haley goes through a lot in this book, and I personally just loved her journey, and Jax was there the whole time for her, and just like whatever she needed, and realized that I can't even say it. There's just something that happens in this book where it broke my heart, but it needed to happen. You know what I mean? And I just love the journey. I love Nikki Castle. I'm a fangirl. I'll say it a million times. Okay, the next one I have is a fantasy romance, and that is A Heart of Blood and Ashes by Milla Vane. So this is a perfect blend of fantasy and romance. If you're looking for a book where you could just like open it and like dive in, you know, the TikTok trend that's going around. I don't know why I thought of that. That is this book for me. I haven't reread it because I'm scared to, but I have been dying to. I think Yavine she's literally like the strongest character, and I think that's why I'm scared to read it, is because I had such an emotional reaction to her story and what she's gone through, and just like how she is as a person, that she holds like a special place in my heart. So yeah, I don't know. But then Matic is also going through his own stuff, and they complement each other so well. Their relationship is 100% equal, but like in different ways. And when you look at them, you don't think it's going to be equal, but it is. I hope that makes sense. But it's a good fantasy romance. Absolutely adored it. Okay, we're moving and grooving. Okay, this is the Mind F series. This is the next book I want to talk about. Look. Let me see if it'll focus. Look at that. Oh, look at that. This is the Mystic Box exclusive edition bind up, and I never had the original bind up, so I was okay with spending $50. So I think the original bind up was like $30. This is a beautiful book. It's a book of 5 different novellas, so it looks thick, but it's like it's a full story with 5 different novellas. It is about a female serial killer, and she has her reasons. She has a hit list, but our main male character that she starts to fall in love with, and he starts to fall in love with her, is actually the FBI agent that is assigned to her case. So you're like, how the hell is that supposed to work out? That is the question you have to ask yourself when you're reading this book, because that is the question that a lot of people have when they're reading this book. And I'm not going to say how it ends. Obviously, it's a romance, so it ends with the HEA, duh. But it's a wild ride, and if you're looking for a good wild ride for the spooky season, that book is it. The next book is Heartbones by Colleen Hoover. This is actually one of my first, I think it's the first Colleen Hoover book that I ever read, and I picked it up because I only had Kindle Unlimited for a certain amount of time. Like, that's only how I read books, and this was a new release on Kindle Unlimited, and I sobbed most of the way through this book. Colleen Hoover does not write, you know, light and fluffy romances. She writes very heavy ones, and this is about 2 people who meet on a beach when they're young, and they start to fall in love and have this whirlwind, like first love kind of a thing, and it turns into way more than I think both of them was expecting, and that's all I'm gonna say. And I loved it. It's just It's a very beloved book for my heart. I'll just say that. The next book I want to mention is Center of Gravity by K.K. Allen. I actually had this for the Battle of the Trope read-along that I did 2 months ago now, I think, with everyone, and I love this book. So it's a forbidden romance, and it is a dancer romance. So if you're looking for a different kind of sports romance, check out this one. Our female character, she is new to LA, and she joins this dance studio. It's like more contemporary, and she's trying to like make it big, and she starts having feelings for the owner of that studio, and that is a big no-no. Big no-no. And I loved it. I think this is a very underrated series by K.K. Allen. The next one I have to mention is Sinner by Sierra Simone. I know a lot of people had their favorites in the pre-series, but this is my absolute favorite. Sean Bell, like, I will die on the hill that Sean Bell is the best Bell brother. Like, I will fight to the death about that. I know that everyone has their own opinion, and that's fine. But I just think that Sean Bell, him being the oldest child and everything that he had to go through in this book, not with the romance, I mean, also with the romance, but like with his family and everything, it hit me on a different level, I guess because I am the oldest child, so it just hit me differently. But also, he's trying to figure out why his best friend's little sister is coming to him looking for lessons in seduction. So yes, this is the Sierra Simone that will make you think, will make you kind of like turn you on your head, like, why am I liking this? But it's also forbidden and taboo, and I loved it. I cannot do a video without mentioning one of my absolute favorites, Antiheroes in Love, mafia, badass female character. Dante, who is a sunshiny mafia boss, which doesn't really make sense, but it is absolute perfection. If you have not read the Antiheroes in Love duet by Gianna Darling, go read it. It's my favorite by her. It's top of the top. The next book I want to talk about is Real by Kennedy Ryan. This was one of my favorite books of last year, and I am actually extremely excited that I got to do a special edition of this book with Dark and Quirky. Our book box should be shipping, I think, in October, and I'm pretty sure it's all sold out. I think there's like 1 or 2 boxes left, but I am extremely grateful that I got to do this box with Dark and Quirky and a couple other people here on BookTube. It was the coolest process ever, and I had to choose Real by Kennedy Ryan because it is just a very special book to me. Our female character goes through her lupus journey in this book. I just related to it so much, as well as it being a good forbidden romance where a director is having a relationship with one of his actors. It was just so good and such a impactful story. I mean, Kennedy Ryan always does that with her books, so are we surprised? No. The next book is not a romance, but it's Where the Mountains Meet the Sea by A.R. Breck. So yes, this is not a romance, but it is a book that utterly wrecked me last year when I read it. I was sobbing for like most of this book, especially like the last 20%. I was done. I was literally done, and it just broke my heart. This is like a childhood friends to lovers that just the timing never works out. I feel like if I start talking about it, I'm going to cry. But if you're looking for like a good book where they don't end up together, check this out. When I went into it, I didn't know it did not have an HEA. I had to ask McKay from Oh Hey It's McKay halfway through. I was like, is this an HEA? And she was like, no, but keep reading. And I was like, McKay. It's a really good book. Really good book. Another one that's not a romance is A Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This is just a fiction book, and I read it back in 2021, I think. And this book really impacted me. It made me like think about my life. I don't know if that makes sense, but like our female character, she actually commits suicide, and she goes into what is called the Midnight Library. And in that, she kind of goes through all of her, not like regrets that she has, but like the choices that she made. So when she's at like a fork in the road of like her life and she chose one way, she can like open up the book and go the other way and see how it kind of worked out. And I thought that was like really interesting. Just like an interesting take on a book of like what happens if someone actually does commit suicide? Like, do they regret it type of a thing too? And I found it very interesting. It was a very impactful read. It's trigger warnings for a lot of like mental health things. So there was a time where I started to read it and I had to stop reading it and pick it up at a different time because I had to be in the right headspace. So I'll give that warning, obviously, with everything that happens in this book. But it is a good book that I think anyone who reads it will get something different out of it. Like, it'll make you think about different things. So yeah, I did want to talk about this one because I do talk about it sometimes. The next 2 books I have are historical romances, and it's 2 of like my top historical romances. And the first is Devil in Winter by Lisa Kleypas. It has this beautiful step back, which I haven't talked about step backs in a while, but I I love Sebastian St. James in this book. I think that him and Evie have the most beautiful romance. He is definitely much an anti-hero. You don't have to read the whole Wallflower series in order, but I would suggest reading them in order. I just feel like you get more out of it when you do, because you see Sebastian from other characters' points of view and how he does bad things. So this is kind of like his redemption book, and I didn't think he could be redeemed, but he did, and I loved it. I love Lisa Kleypas is a genius in writing historicals, and I love it. The next one is The Hunter by Kerrigan Byrne. I talked about this a lot back in like 2020, 2021 when I read it. I love this. This is a very dark historical. So if you are someone who is a lover of dark romance and you want to jump into the historic romance genre, start with Kerrigan Byrne. This whole series is absolutely like dark. Every prologue is super like trigger warning out the ass type of a thing. But in this one, I love Christopher Argent because he is an assassin and he is supposed to take out an opera singer. And when he goes to take her out, he finds out that she has a son. And so it gives him flashbacks to like when he was younger, he was raised by like a single mother in prison and he saw all these horrible things happen to her. So now when he sees her, he's like, oh, I'm going to make it my mission to make sure no one else takes you out, which obviously damages his career as an assassin, but so good. So good. 3 books left. Now, one I'm going to talk about you cannot read by itself, and that is Exodus by Kate Stewart. So this is the second book in the, I always want to say Ravenwood, but it's Ravenhood series. And this is the second book, and I was so shocked by the middle of this book. I could not believe Kate Stewart went there with the story. Like, I literally could not. I don't know how to describe this other than our female character goes on a very long journey and it takes place over 3 books. And she meets different men at different points in her life and they all mean something to her. So I just want to throw it out there because that's all I'm going to say, because I feel like if you've read it, you know. If you haven't, I don't know how you haven't, I don't know how you've avoided spoilers, but read it. Just read it. It's very good. The next one is Credence by Penelope Douglas. I mean, are we surprised I had to mention this beauty? I've reread it this year. I absolutely love this story. A lot of people think like, oh, just Pen Douglas is like super spicy, super forbidden. Oh, it's just like super taboo. Yeah, you're right. It is all of those things. But at the same time, it is a very, very, very emotional read where Tiernan, she just hits different for me, and I just really loved her journey. And every time I reread it, I find like a quote or something else in this book that just makes me love it even more. I don't know. And the last book that I want to talk about is Hush Hush by Lucia Franco. I have like 2 editions of this book, but this was the one that was closest on my shelves because I have a lot of books stacked on top of each other because I have a ton of books. This is I wanted to put this book in particular because this is the biggest age gap I've ever read. I think it's like 31 years. He's 52 and she's 20 or 21? No, she's 21. Yeah. And he's 52, I think. It is a hella big age gap, but this story was so good. I reread it, I think, last year via audio because I read it years ago and I was like, no, I want to read it again. I read the audio and I loved it. The audiobook was so good. James is a literally daddy AF and I love it. I want everyone to read this by Lucia because I feel like everyone gets scared because of her Balance series, which don't get me wrong, that is super taboo. All of her books are really taboo and forbidden. But this one, not that it's like a little bit more normalized, but it's not as like bananas as the Off Balance series. So I'll say that. Like I'm in the middle of the Off Balance series and it's good, but this I think will always be one of my favorite books by her. So everyone go check out Hush Hush. But those are 29 books for my 29th birthday. I am so sorry that this video is so long. I knew that it was going to be long because I had 29 books to talk about and they were my favorites and I have a hard time shutting up about my favorites. But yeah, drop me like a birthday cake, any emoji like that in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for supporting me and continuously watching my videos. I am just very grateful for all of you guys and that I get to celebrate my birthday with you guys and do like videos like this. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for more content from me. As always, I hope you're living a novel life and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.